I am Brittney Gallagher, and I'm in one of my favorite places, which is sandwiched between books. There's too many books, not enough time. And I'm joined by.
And I'm the bobblehead bust of Phil Libin, and welcome to Degrees of Freedom, making the out of office world.
Last time we talked about crucible moments and how the pandemic was one that finally made Phil and many others rethink the beloved office. And we're hearing a lot of different models thrown around, from fully distributed to the hybrid model to back in the office full time. Phil, being one of the fully distributed companies, how often are you able to see your knowledge workers in person?
Well, as often as we want to, really. I wind up meeting with people on my team roughly maybe once every 3 weeks, but that's not with everyone, of course. We
Mhm,
just get groups of people to come over, kind of as it makes sense.
mhm.
But I'm not in all of the group meetings, of course. So different teams meet with each other whenever they want. So, for example, next week I'm heading to Austin to spend some time with some of our team members there, and at the same time, there's a different group of people meeting in San Jose. So people are getting together every couple of weeks. The important thing is that when we do get together, we don't waste time, showing each other slides in a conference room. We actually do things that are meaningful.
In this episode, we're exploring how some of our guests are thinking about return to office. Both Roelof Botha and Tammy Sun are back to talk about their respective setups. And then we have Lydia Jett. Phil, could you tell us a bit about Lydia?
Lydia is great. I've known her for I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years at this point, and we finally got a chance to work together when she invested and joined our board of directors. Lydia is with the SoftBank Vision Fund.
And we'll also hear from Asana's Joanna Miller, who leads learning and development there, to talk a bit about what Asana's setup looks like now. And later in the episode, I interview different knowledge workers who are shaping this out of office world, each with differing opinions on returning to the office and how they had very different responses to it. But first, Phil interviewed Roelof, Tammy, Joanna, and Lydia about their respective companies' plans for returning to the office.
How are you running the company and thinking about the opportunities in a distributed or hybrid environment?
At the beginning, we were all living in a completely remote world. And honestly, that was a bit lonely for many people. Some people loved it, and some people really, really hated it. And when we reopened our office last year with strict protocols, you had to be vaccinated, and we were doing frequent testing because people really valued a mask-free experience in the office so that we could see facial expressions and just be more comfortable around each other. And that was magical. And we went to a phase where we would do 2 days were mandatory in the office for those who were in the Bay Area, Mondays and Tuesdays. And the rest of the week was, pick your menu. And for some people, it means that they go see companies. Some people wanted to meet companies at our office. Some people wanted to just work from home. And it was, let people choose the way in which they work most productively. Because candidly, if I need to write an investment memo or build a financial model, it's very hard to do that in an open plan office where I'm interrupted every 5 minutes. Open plan is fantastic when I want to collaborate, share information, build culture and norms. But mixing the two historically with open plan, I think was a massive mistake. Being in person together is also helpful for decision meetings, building team spirit, esprit de corps, things like that. And so I think the hybrid world that we embraced, where you're in the office a couple of days and a couple of days not, people have agency over their own time. If you need to pick up, your child on a Thursday afternoon, you can. If you want to go to a exercise class on a Friday morning, go for it. Measure output, don't measure input. And now we've also opened an office in London as we've embraced the opportunity in Europe. And so we've had to cope with the idea that pretty permanently, we have people that are in different physical spaces. And so how do you use technology to bridge that gap and to try to get the best of both worlds?
And when did you decide that the company was going to be fully distributed? This wasn't a short-term thing that let's write it out and then we can all go back. But yeah, we are out of office forever.
Well, I mean, the out of office thing is a very difficult thing to put back. People made significant life changes over the course of 18 months. We're here in Bentonville. We've had people move to, different states to access better cost of living, better, all sorts of things. And so I think we would have inflicted serious churn risk in the employee base by saying, okay, well now actually, you're required to come into the office every day.
But you gave people that option, right? The certainty that we're not going back to the office, we're not going to call you back. I think most companies didn't, right? Most companies are still screwing around with, oh, maybe we'll start doing 3 days a week, and like keeping employees in this like constant suspense of like, well, I can't quite rearrange my life because I don't know what's going to happen with the office. So you decided pretty early, like, yeah, we're not calling you back. We're not going to go back. Let's just lean into it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's hard. Like very few people have done that.
But I think I think amidst all the chaos of the last 18 months, I think delivering as much predictability as you can as an employer and as a company, like where can people really be, where can they access predictability to think about how they want to design their lives? We were not losing anything by not being in person. In fact, our productivity has skyrocketed to the point where we've had to implement very specific messages and efforts inside the company to prevent people from being so productive that they burn out, right? So people the company is accessing as much productivity and as much value as before, and I think that like there was no reason to contemplate a return to work in office when we were really accessing mostly net gains, and to not say that to our employees and not give them that level of predictability was just kind of like would be like a shit move.
Kind of what is the work culture at Asana, just in terms of where is everyone? Are you all in the central office? Are you distributed? How is that working?
Yes, we have 11 offices that are distributed around the globe. Right now during COVID, well, we're still under different restrictions depending on which part of the globe you're in. Everyone is distributed. And people have the opportunity if they would like to go into the office and, work in a different environment if they'd like, but they're not obligated to. And our headquarters is in San Francisco, and that's where we have the biggest concentration of employees. But we also have sites in Europe as well as Asia.
So how has SoftBank been running in the distributed environment over the past 2 years? Like how distributed are you guys? How's that changing?
I am reminded of my old professor in economics telling me there's never a clear answer to big questions like that. But
you just start with it depends.
The answer is always it depends. We're a global organization, and it has been really fascinating to me watching over the past 2 years, watching how the globe has responded very differently to this pandemic. And so we have headquarters in Tokyo, in London, in California, and many other smaller offices around the world. And I think the answer is it really depends on where you're based. So our Japanese colleagues, the United States, have been fully remote. Our London colleagues have been fully in the office. And so your location, the culture of your economy really has defined your experience during this. But we in the United States, I think because we've been on the West Coast as a headquarters, and the West Coast has had a different policy to the East Coast in terms of work, has been fully remote. And so we're now sitting in our 7th iteration of a conversation about what happens when COVID's over and how do we go back to real life. I actually opted into a remote first life back months before the pandemic started. I had been living this silly life where I was traveling around the world, hardly ever in the office anyway. And so I said, if I'm never in the office anyway, why not live where I want to live? So I'm a bit of an outlier in that I already believed that this worked before the pandemic. But what's really been interesting to watch is the cultural clashes of a global organization trying to reset norms when the Americans have decided we don't need to be in the office, and the British have decided we do. And so I think we'll see more autonomy. I think the United States organization of SoftBank will kind of cleave off and set its own rules, because I think there's no going back for some of us.
I mean, what gave you the confidence to just be fully distributed? For the sake of time, you can just say me.
Yeah. Phil told me to say all of this. I'm being paid. I'm going to just check my script. Did I say all the right things? Yeah.
Thank you. None of that is true. But it is, I think, pretty remarkable. When I talk to companies now, and I'm sure this is the same thing for you and for your customers as well. If your customers are mostly larger, well-established companies, how many of them have embraced this and figured this out? And how many of them are still like, while buying products from you, are still kind of hedging their bets about, and they're never going to be back to the way things were?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't really, we don't ask for that level of data from our kind of information from our customers. But I will say that the trend in our customer base is, I think the one trend that I think is particularly interesting and relevant to this conversation is we are serving, like we know and we can map obviously where all of our members are, like physically, like geographically. And we are seeing a pretty interesting expansion across geographies in terms of like where human beings live, right? We're also seeing the trend around distributed work expand beyond US borders. So companies, when I think, our fastest growing customer base are US multinational enterprises. And not only is work being distributed within the continental US and the 50 states of the US, but it's also being distributed globally. Like companies are going global much faster than they ever have before. And so we operate in every single time zone in the world. We support, like I said, at the end of this year, hundreds of thousands of members in more than 80 countries.
Do you think that's one of the things that this distributed movement will accelerate? Is just like, if you're going to be distributed, why not be global? Or you could just be global by default.
Yeah, I mean, there's the edge of California as an arbitrary line.
Right.
Just go to Japan.
which you're doing, right? You're selling in Japan.
Yes, we are.
So when you like survey your employees, like what do they say about, do they want to come back to a centralized location? Do they like working distributed? What's the sentiment like?
It's mixed. There are people who love working distributed. They have a home setup or a co-working space that really works for them. There are other folks who really are excited to come back to the office, to a physical location. They want to be able to collaborate in person together with folks more regularly. They may also have more challenges in their home environment that make it not as focused or productive for them to be there. And there are people who are more on the fence of like, I would love to come in for a really important, high energy, really high contact things. And I prefer to do my primary work alone at home or in a space of my own design.
Now that we've heard from leadership, let's hear from the knowledge workers who are shaping this out of office world. 3 in particular, and each of whom having a bit of a different perspective about returning to the office full time. First, there's Joe, a software engineer who's really looking forward to being in the office full time. And then there's Renee, who does operations at a tech startup, and she likes a little bit of both. She likes being at work to do work and be with her colleagues, but when she needs to focus, she prefers to be at home. And then there's Annika, who quit her job as an investment banker because they were making her return to the office full time. I actually had a really hard time finding someone who was excited to return to the office full time. And we already recorded our intro and outro to the episode before we found a guest who was actually really excited to return to the office. So I'm joined by
Joe Wyclawick.
So Joe, tell us a little bit about, why you're excited to return to the office and what you do.
Yeah, I'm a software engineer, and I really enjoy the collaborative environment of being there in person with my colleagues, being able to interact on technical issues. It was a lot easier and more comfortable to work face-to-face with people. It's interesting because about 4 months before everybody went home in March of 2020, we actually had taken down our cubicles and moved everybody to desks, sort of rolling tables, face-to-face in a very collaborative environment. So we had just switched to that. We had ordered more of these tables, turned in the rented cubicles, and we were really kind of clicking in that mode. And then March happened, and we all had to go home. So we liked that environment. But yeah. I you had a hard time finding people like me. I am pretty unique, even on my team. So
yeah. So about that was my next question. Does everyone feel that way? Like, how many people feel like you in your company, and how is that working out?
Yeah, so we're part of a much bigger company, but our group locally is about 20 to 25 people, and we actually gave up our physical office in the middle of the pandemic. Well, when things started to open back up again, we got a temporary workspace. I'm the only person who goes in like every day of the week. I'll occasionally work from home on a Friday, but most of the time it's every day. And what we get is just a couple people any other day, and a few people are, maybe twice a week, but most of the team does not come into the office at all.
Oh, so it doesn't come in at all.
No.
Oh, wow. Okay. So then for you, it must be interesting because you had this like great collaborative environment before COVID. And now, since so many people aren't coming in, do you feel like you're losing out on that collaborative environment?
I feel like I've gotten some of it back, I guess is the way I'm looking at it, because as a team performed very well during COVID when we never saw each other. Most of us didn't, see anybody, that we worked with in person for a year and a half. Now that we've at least got some face-to-face time, I enjoy at least that little bit of collaboration.
So for you, do you just find that you're just more productive, like out of the home? Like what, just personally, what do you feel like is the best, like that makes going to an office better for you?
I didn't feel as productive over the long term. I don't know if it's the lack of structure. I think I suffer a little bit from I remain a little too connected even in the off hours. And I think for somebody who does that, it can be hard when you're working from home. It was harder to have that separation of the day, I guess.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. It's great to get this perspective, because I think it's really important. I think, you may be rare, but you're certainly not alone. So Renee, tell me a little bit about, your experience with being a facilities manager and having to be at a physical location, and then having the pandemic hit and that change everything. And now, we're 2+ years into this. Where are you at now?
Well, the earliest anybody's willing to say is something around like September, October of 2022. And even then, it's not clear that people are on the same page with, I hate to be cliche about it, but what management wants and what employees want. We've all read the articles. There's a lot of manager roles that really want to be in person much more than employee, which is totally fair. I'm way more an effective worker when I'm in person. That's actually one of the things that I personally enjoy about coming in person, is being surrounded by this like vibe of we're all here to work, so let's get some work done. Even though I love being able to do my laundry and prep dinner and make bread and water the plants.
Renee, for you personally, where do you stand? What's your ideal setup like?
That's an interesting question. Personally, I think, I work in workplace, and part of what drives me is that I like to be in service to other people. And so it definitely makes my job more rewarding if more people are around and if I am physically present, because then I can see their faces, I can talk to them, I can like respond to their needs. And when I come in, that gives me an opportunity to be more responsive to what people need and to overhear what people are talking about, and then interject and say, hey, how about we do this, this, and this? And it's palpable when the things that I do in person are positively affecting the people who are also here in person.
Yeah.
I never, if possible, want to go back to 40 hours a week on-site work, because so much of the actual work of my work doesn't actually need me to do that. I've been at my company for about 4 years now, so I'm definitely feeling like I should ponder my next career move. And it's funny, even though I say I hate working remotely because I get less done, I'll see myself scrolling through job listings and in facilities and workplace work a lot. Like now they're being a lot more explicit. This is an on-site role. And I just keep scrolling.
Yeah, you're
And
just
I'm
like,
wait a second. Maybe I do like remote work.
could you tell us a little bit about your experience with return to office?
So for the past 3.5 years, I've enjoyed working at an investment bank. Most of that was from the office. And then when they had us work from home, I transitioned to a home office environment, which I appreciated. And then just more recently, in the last few months, they wanted us to return. And I decided to try to find work outside of the bank where I could maintain my work from home environment.
As someone who went to the office and then came home and started working from home, what was that difference for you and what made you not want to return to the office?
I was renting an apartment 10 minutes from the city prior to COVID, and now I own a pretty big house right outside the city. I have a massive garden. I have 2 huskies. I get to cook from home. I can take an hour-and-a-half long lunch. I get a lot more work done than I did before. I get to go on jogs a couple of times a day. I feel more productive. I get to do yoga in my downtime versus when I was in the office. Most of my day revolved around just managerial tasks within the office, just things like that. I couldn't run errands during the day like I can now.
Yeah, because you're a mom, right? So that also
Yes.
plays a part too, I imagine.
Oh, a lot more mom time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like now I find that I can pick up a Saturday. I can do 4 to 6 hours of work and, manage children at the same time. So.
Yeah, it seems like it really provides a lot more flexibility. And you mentioned you kind of moved sort of slightly to the suburbs. And what would your commute have been like?
I used Waze to determine how far my commute would have been. I would have been commuting a little over 2 hours total.
Wow.
Every single day with the traffic.
Yeah.
If I would have returned to the office, I would have had a manager position, which would have come with a substantial bonus. There's really no amount of money in the world. The only reason why I ever wanted to make a ton of money ever was for freedom. But right now I have that freedom. I have a garden, I have dogs, I have my family, I have all the things that I wanted that money to afford me. So why do I need that money? I think most importantly, I'm living the life that I wanted. And every day I wake up, I'm well rested. I'm not stressed out. I'm not thinking about all the things that I have to get done before the day. I get to go outside and, harvest tomatoes before the sun's up. I just feel like my day moves a lot more at the pace at which I feel comfortable.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us and telling your story. And good luck. That was Joe, Renee, and Annika, all knowledge workers who are helping shape this out-of-office world, and each of whom had a bit of a different perspective about returning to the office full-time. I actually had a pretty hard time finding someone who was really excited about returning to the office full-time. I talked to people who said they were excited, and I'm like, oh, great, so you're excited to return full-time. Can I interview you? And they're like, oh no. Like, I just want to come back like 2 days or 3 days. Like, I don't want to go back full-time. And I found this again and again, and it was actually quite difficult to find people who are really excited about being in the office all the time.
And part-time in the office doesn't really make a lot of sense because companies bearing the full cost of an office. So if you're only coming in, 2 days a week, first of all, unless everyone's coming in 2 days a week, which is, pretty miserable. If you're just coming in 2 or 3 days a week, then chances are the people that you're coming there to see might not be there, or at least aren't going to be reliably there. So that defeats the whole purpose. Plus, you've got all the expense. The company's paying all of the rent and expense for it. And the employees are still constrained as to where they can live. And so they still have, I'd say, 80% of the problems of coming in full time, as opposed to just getting rid of the office, using that money to move people wherever they want to go, give them a great quality of life, get rid of traffic completely, and get together in person in places that are actually fun to get together in person when you want to, not in offices, which aren't actually any fun. They're kind of the lowest common denominator. So I think a lot of people who are excited to go back to the office are theoretically excited because they haven't been there in 2 years and they miss people. And yeah, it is great the first day or two that you're back, but then it starts to suck just like it always did. And I think there's more and more people realize that. They realize that they really don't want to be back.
Yeah, and Phil, one of the things that you do at is you actually pay your employees for not having an office, right?
Well, we just took the money that we used to spend on facilities, on office, and on rent, on furniture, on coffee, on security, on internet, all that kind of stuff. We used to spend a lot of money as a company because it was our obligation as employers to make sure that employees have a safe and productive and healthy place to work. And we figured we still have that obligation. We didn't give up the obligation. We just gave up the office. So we just took all of that money and we just split it up every month and we give it to all of our employees. So I think currently it's about $800 a month. So everyone gets an extra $800 a month on their paycheck, which they are encouraged to use to set up productive, healthy places to work from, whether it's getting a bigger place to live or getting membership in a club or whatever. $800 a month actually kind of goes a long way in a lot of places.
Really does.
And when we polled our own people, hey, would you rather we keep the office so that you can go back 2 to 3 days a week, or would you rather have $800 a month? The number of people who said, no, I'd rather go back 2 days a week than have $800 a month was a round number.
Really? So there wasn't that one ornery person who was like, got to be different. They're all like, no, that's enough money for it to matter.
I'm sure had we publicized that, there was basically, looks like there was literally zero people. Some people would have wanted to be the exception. That's the kind of people we have. I think everyone expected their vote to count, so they all voted the way they really felt.
Slack has the Future Forum Pulse report, and the latest one from April had some interesting statistics with the general sentiment that many knowledge workers are not happy about returning to the office. And it's really affecting their employee experience scores. And we can see here everything from productivity to work-life balance is decreasing as more and more people are forced to return to the office. And what I found actually even more interesting was, and maybe this isn't technically surprising, that fully in-person office workers are the least happy. But maybe that makes sense. It's pretty stressful. You've got to commute. You've got all these new things. You have less time with your family, less flexibility. But one thing I thought was really interesting in this was sense of belonging. And it turns out that people who are fully remote, according to this, actually have a greater sense of belonging than those who are fully in person. And I just thought that was really interesting. That's actually what one of our next episodes is going to be about, is building trust and belonging. And so I just was very surprised to see this.
I was really surprised to see that belonging stat as well, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Because if you're working for an in-person company, your choice of where to work for is confined to companies that are within a pretty close distance to where you live. So it might not be the place that you most want to work. It's just the place where you are, and it's too difficult to change things. But if you're working fully distributed, if you're working for the kinds of companies that let you be everywhere, there's a pretty good chance that the place you're working at is the place you most want to work at in the whole world. Because if you wanted to work a different place, you could change. And so it just may be more of a self-selection thing, where people who have distributed jobs are more likely to be working at exactly the company that they want to work for, and therefore they feel a greater sense of belonging than people who are working in more traditional jobs and they're geographically constrained and they're working for wherever they happen to have landed based on where they live.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. And we actually, ADP recently had a report of they polled employees all over the world and asked them, how they felt about return to office. And 64% said they'd be willing to quit if they had to go back to the office full time. So it's very clear where people stand here. And actually, speaking of that recently just happened at Apple. So Ian Goodfellow, the now former director of machine learning, said that they believe strongly that more flexibility would have been the best policy for their team. And Apple was making everyone return to the office, and Ian was not a fan. And they're seeing quite a bit of turnover at Apple and a lot of other big companies that are requiring this.
Yeah, I think, look, there are some jobs that are going to require you to be in a specific geographic place. If you're a chef or a brain surgeon, or if you're working, at Apple in the secret hardware division, underneath a spaceship or something. But for jobs that don't require you to be in a specific place, that you only have to be in the place because management tells you so, companies that have those policies are obviously not going to be able to attract and retain the best people. And any companies who think that anyone who thinks that they're going to be able to get investment bankers to commute for 2 hours a day, or software engineers or designers, they're delusional. You're not going to be able to do this with the best people. So I think companies who unnecessarily force knowledge workers to commute and to get into an office are going to have a very hard time hiring and retaining really top people. And that's going to accumulate, and that's going to be a downward spiral. And I think pretty soon, the smart companies, and Apple is certainly a smart company, are going to realize that and change their tracks for jobs that don't absolutely require it.
But they built that spaceship, though.
They did build a space. They converted it into live-work lofts. It's pretty sweet.
That's true. Okay, yeah, I guess some housing. Convert all these offices to housing.
Well, but I mean, but shouldn't they? I mean, I don't know about the specific spaceship, but wouldn't it be nice if the nicest places, the nicest physical buildings, like, and places in big cities, which tend to be the new like office blocks with the nice parks and food service and everything worked out? Wouldn't it be nice if the place where we spend the most money on buildings were the place where people lived, where you actually like have a life and have a family? So like, yeah, I think it's a pretty great change in the world if we take all the money that we used to spend on office parks and we spend the vast majority of it and the vast majority of that land and resources and everything else making the places where people actually live and walk to work and hang out, making those beautiful.
The office was the lowest common denominator, although maybe it would be great housing. And in this series, we'll continue to explore how this redistribution of opportunity is changing the world.
Yeah, so big thanks to Roelof, Tammy, Lydia, and Joanna. It was great talking with you. And we'll see you next time.
That's it for this episode of Degrees of Freedom, Making the Out-of-Office World. I'm Renee Gallagher.
And I'm Phil Libben.
Bye.